Humanity, it was said, could be divided into two distinct types: those who enjoyed 18+ adult games, and those who did not. He had heard this sentiment before. The first type, those who indulged in adult games, found themselves drawn to figures like her, a captivating character from the game Last Arcanum. He, however, had once belonged to the latter group, the rest who didn't, until his path crossed with Last Arcanum. The game, known as Last Arcanum, was more than it appeared at first glance. He realized that Last Arcanum was not merely an adult game. Indeed, the internet widely acknowledged that Last Arcanum was an RPG, with its non-erotic elements often proving more engaging than those of other games. The erotic aspects, it was commonly stated, were simply a bonus. He now approached Last Arcanum not as a mere adult game, but as a divine RPG, having undergone a class change to become an admirer of its deeper qualities. He recalled a time when he considered skipping the erotic cutscenes, believing them secondary. However, his current activity of diligently collecting pictures of Iris-chan suggested a more complex appreciation. He believed it disrespectful to the creators to skip any part of the game, choosing instead to savor every corner of Last Arcanum. Yet, even with this conviction, he found himself contemplating skipping an upcoming event. It was an event featuring Skamultos. Skamultos, also known as Ultos Randall, was a character whose very appearance exuded maximum discomfort. He proudly declared himself the legitimate son of a duke's family, often chuckling to himself. At the Magic Academy, Skamultos reveled in the suffering of handsome protagonists, subjecting them to all sorts of harassment. He was, simply put, a villainous mid-boss. This scumbag delighted in inflicting intense traumas upon the heroines. Even the clean, well-endowed, and player-loved heroine, Sieg, was not spared his cruelty, left weeping and apologizing. The gamer's face contorted in disgust and anger. He cursed the character, declaring that Skamultos infuriated him, especially when it came to his beloved Iris-chan. He resolved to skip the event, urging himself to enter the next segment. Indeed, Skamultos was overwhelmingly popular, but in the most negative way imaginable, often depicted as a pig. It was a standard trope in Last Arcanum fanfiction for the handsome protagonist to brutally defeat Skamultos, thereby healing the heroine's trauma. Even the game's production team explicitly stated their unforgiveness for Skamultos in an interview. During a live broadcast, the moment Skamultos appeared, the screen was flooded with comments from players expressing their intense hatred, demanding justice for characters like Riella-chan, and questioning why such a shitty character was even included. In the latter half of the main route, Skamultos met a brutal end, impaled by multiple blades, screaming in disbelief and pain, questioning why this was happening to him. His in-game demise was absolute, marked by a tombstone bearing the name Ultos Randall. Despite his terrible character, his fate was sealed by the game's mastermind, a common end for villains. Unlike other mid-boss characters who might have reconciliation events or different battle routes, Skamultos had none, perhaps due to his incredibly annoying behavior. The gamer, still processing the game's lore, felt a dull ache in his head. He stood in his room, adjusting his tie, a profound weariness settling over him. He needed to sleep soon, having pushed himself through the last part of his 24th playthrough, or perhaps it was his 5th. The exact number blurred in his exhausted mind. His head throbbed as he stretched, shirtless, yearning only to spend his life immersed in Last Arcanum. Yet, despite his numerous playthroughs, he still hadn't witnessed the true ending, nor had he explored the specific route involving Skamultos. He began to change into his pajamas, reflecting on the arduous conditions required to unlock the true ending, which included completing every single achievement. With only 2 hours before he had to leave for work, he decided to try and snatch a brief period of sleep, collapsing onto his bed. Even in his slumber, the thought persisted. He needed to complete the Skamultos route. Without it, he knew, he could never achieve full completion of the game. As he drifted deeper into sleep, a vivid dream unfolded. He saw himself, dressed sharply, surrounded by 3 beautiful heroines, including Iris-chan, a charming witch, and another gentle woman. He yearned to be the protagonist, to live happily ever after with them, even wishing to be reincarnated into the world of Last Arcanum itself. Suddenly, a strange noise pierced the dream. In the dream, his desire for justice manifested as he found himself physically confronting Skamultos, delivering a powerful kick. The villain reeled from the blow, and the gamer felt a surge of satisfaction, thinking how enjoyable it would be to thoroughly beat the despicable character. The dream faded, replaced by the sight of an exquisitely detailed, coffered ceiling. He stood in a lavish room, his own appearance subtly altered, his dark hair now a lighter shade. A sense of confusion washed over him as he observed the opulent surroundings, a nagging feeling that the interior looked vaguely familiar. He recognized the surroundings. It was the background from Last Arcanum, but he couldn't pinpoint the exact location within the game world. He quickly dismissed the thought, realizing it wasn't the time to worry about the contents of his PC before reincarnation. He needed to calm down, lest they discover he was a man of culture. He knew the game extensively, having completed almost all achievements. Surviving shouldn't be too difficult, he mused, but being reincarnated into the world of Last Arcanum was a different story. Panic could wait. First, he needed to understand his immediate situation. He considered his new appearance, wondering which game character he had been reincarnated as. There should be a mirror nearby, he thought, to confirm his identity. He found a large, ornate mirror and cautiously approached it, pulling back a curtain. His reflection stared back, revealing a plump, round-faced young man with light, wavy hair and a ruffled shirt. The sight sent a wave of horror through him. He screamed, a small, ghostly image of his former self, glasses and dark hair, screaming alongside him. He recognized the face, the body, the identity. I'm scum. His horrified realization echoed through the grand estate, a single, desperate word escaping his lips. Altos. A sudden, piercing scream startled a maid, causing her to drop a tray laden with dishes. Porcelain shattered on the floor. Another maid, with short brown hair, calmly addressed the flustered maid, Riella, who was apologizing profusely. The second maid remarked that such incidents were typical when Alto-sama was involved, though she admitted even she was surprised by the earlier commotion. The senior maid then instructed Riella to leave the mess, stating she would handle it, and told her to go check on the young master. Riella, still flustered, meekly agreed. The gamer, now inhabiting the body of Skamoltos, stared at his reflection in disbelief. He had managed to reincarnate into the world of Last Arcanum, but the reality of his new form was overwhelming. It's all over, he thought, despairing. His mind raced, grappling with the cruel twist of fate. Of all the characters, he had become Skamoltos, a figure destined to be hated by everyone, made to squirm, and ultimately, to die. A desperate denial welled within him. No, it had to be a mistake. There was no way he was Skamoltos. He questioned why he couldn't have been the protagonist, Sieg, instead. As he continued to stare at his reflection, a detail caught his attention. The face looking back at him was indeed Skamoltos, but younger. He observed that this version of Skamoltos was significantly younger than his depiction in the game, perhaps only 10 years old. This realization sparked a flicker of hope. If he was younger, there might still be time to avoid the bad ending, as this was around the age when Skamoltos began his descent into arrogance. He remembered the lore. Altos, a genius with a talent for magic, became extremely cocky from the age of 12. He then became completely self-indulgent, neglecting his magic studies and sword training. Furthermore, according to the official settings, Altos became infatuated with women, chasing after them, as a maid tried to fend him off while another woman wept in the background. After leading such an unhealthy lifestyle, he transformed into the full-fledged Skamoltos that the gamer knew and despised. A new strategy formed in his mind. If he did the opposite of everything Skamoltos had done, he might be able to avoid his destined death. He resolved to ignore women, study moderately, and train diligently. Most importantly, he decided he must try to stay away from the protagonist's party as much as possible. He stared, captivated by the maid's appearance, wondering if such beauty had truly existed within the game. She was undeniably cute. Moments later, the maid, Riella, approached him cautiously, asking if he was troubled. She admitted she had heard his scream and initially thought it might be one of his usual tantrums. He recoiled internally at her words, realizing the implication of his usual tantrums and acknowledging the severity of his current situation as Skamoltos. His gaze lingered on her, particularly on the prominent heart-shaped emblem adorning her chest, a detail that seemed to pulsate with her presence. As he continued to stare, Riella grew visibly flustered, crossing her arms defensively. He, too, felt a blush creep across his face, while his inner gamer self observed the awkward exchange with a knowing look. Riella began to apologize profusely, her head bowed in shame. He, meanwhile, finally recognized her from the game's lore. This was Skamoltos' attendant maid, a character who had only ever appeared in flashbacks. He struggled to recall her name, a faint memory stirring within him. Then, with a jolt, he remembered. That's right, it's Riella. Still, Riella continued her torrent of apologies, her voice barely audible. He tried to interject, calling out, Hey, Riella. What are you apologizing for so much? His attempt to calm her only seemed to worsen her distress. She burst into tears, apologizing for talking back, and then, through her sobs, corrected him. My name is not Reina. It's Riella. In her extreme distress, she then added, I'll be Riella from now on. He stared, utterly bewildered by her emotional outburst and the contradictory statements. Huh? What are you talking about? I called you Riella, he thought, a grim realization dawning on him that this situation was far from good. Iris-chan was in a state of extreme panic, repeatedly apologizing to Skamoltos, who stood with his arms crossed, looking annoyed by her excessive reaction. She had seemingly bumped into him, eliciting a small ow from him. The male gamer, observing the scene, internally questioned the intensity of Iris-chan's fear, while Skamoltos himself appeared bewildered by her frantic apologies. A stark realization dawned on the male gamer. If this situation persisted, Skamoltos would inevitably be perceived as the villain. He mentally cursed the unfolding events. Iris-chan continued her torrent of apologies, bowing deeply and repeatedly, which only exacerbated Skamoltos' distress. He pleaded with her to stop, fearing that her relentless apologies would solidify his image as the antagonist. She then explained, amidst her apologies, that she simply preferred using the masculine pronoun, or, quickly adding that her explanation made no sense. Skamoltos, initially confused, then understood her peculiar linguistic habit. The male gamer, witnessing this peculiar exchange, found himself reminded of Riella's character setting within the game's lore. A detailed character introduction for Riella appeared, describing her as an unusually devoted maid to Skamoltos in Last Arcadia's official story. It revealed that despite her loyalty, she was manipulated by Skamoltos' selfishness, ultimately leading to her right hand being broken. Skamoltos had unilaterally dismissed her, a dedicated maid who had worked hard since she was young, and she subsequently became disliked by the mansion staff, losing the opportunity to correct his personality. The narrative continued, emphasizing Skamoltos' callous dismissal of the maid who had served him faithfully since childhood. His actions further alienated him from the mansion's staff, and he squandered any chance to improve his character. The male gamer concluded that Riella was a pivotal figure in Scamolto's story. He recalled that when this tragic backstory was published as a short story on the official website, it sparked a significant outcry from players, who demanded a scenario where the maid, unjustly dismissed due to Scamolto's self-serving happiness, would find her own happiness. Iris-chan remained visibly distressed, her eyes welling with tears. The male gamer internally asserted that only true villains would unjustly fire or intentionally frighten an attendant maid. Scamoltos, however, with a seemingly innocent smile, suggested that their immediate priority should be to reassure her. He, with a wide, unsettling grin, questioned Riella, asking why she appeared so frightened. Riella, tears welling in her eyes, looked utterly terrified. Still visibly distressed, Riella, now kneeling, explained to her young master that her fears stemmed from her failure to properly perform the daily, the previous day, and for having caused him trouble. Meanwhile, the male gamer reacted with profound confusion, questioning the very meaning of this mysterious He pondered if referred to the simple act of feeding a baby, recalling an image of a maid doing so. He then considered if the he knew was fundamentally different from what Riella meant. Riella, looking flustered, then asked him why he was inquiring about such a thing. Riella, covering her mouth in surprise, exclaimed that he must have devised yet another new game, finding the entire situation terrible. She then began to detail the various types of according to the young master, revealing there were 48 different kinds. She described one where the young master would sit on her lap, facing each other, and another back-to-back seated Riella continued her explanation, describing a lap pillow with a cover where she would provide a lap pillow on the couch, and a standing from behind where she would feed him while standing behind him. She then hesitantly asked if he still wished to know more. Both Scamoltos and the male gamer reacted with profound shock to Riella's increasingly explicit descriptions, particularly the mention of a lap pillow with a cover The scene then shifted to Riella performing the very lap pillow with a cover feeding Scamoltos who lay contentedly on her lap, confirming the male gamer's disturbing understanding of the situation. The male gamer looked on with a deeply disturbed expression, while Scamoltos, still on Riella's lap, appeared blissfully content, completely oblivious to the implications of his actions. He continued to process the disturbing revelation, his mind reeling from the true nature of the demands. Riella, noticing his distress, assured him it was fine, explaining she merely felt a little dizzy. Despite her words, Riella's internal thoughts betrayed a deeper concern, lamenting that Scamoltos would make such a beautiful woman engage in unsavory acts, acknowledging her own beauty in the process. A vivid flashback then showed Scamoltos, eyes closed in bliss, being attended to by Riella, who gently offered him a treat while uttering a soft Returning to the present, the male gamer, still grappling with the implications, questioned Riella directly, asking if her compliance meant she would perform the if he were to order it. His blunt question caused Riella to flinch, her expression shifting to one of profound distress, while he himself appeared flustered and uncertain. He quickly pulled back, his mind racing, realizing that if he were to act like a villain, it would undoubtedly lead to a bleak future. Such a choice, he concluded, was simply not an option. His thoughts continued to spiral, the gravity of the situation pressing down on him as he considered the true cost of these demands, and in exchange for one's very life. He firmly rejected the notion. He then turned to Riella, seeking confirmation, asking if such a pervasive system of could truly be common in this world, even for a mere dog. He desperately hoped it was not the case. With a renewed sense of resolve, he declared that Riella did not have to perform the Her eyes widened in shock, and she stammered, asking if he was firing her, explaining that she was told she would be dismissed if she failed to perform the every day. As Riella spoke, he noticed her injured hand. He reiterated his stance, assuring her that he would not make her do anything of the sort, especially with her injury. He explained that he knew about her injured hand not by simply observing, but from the official information available. Riella, surprised, asked how he had discovered it. Her eyes widened in shock, a blush spreading across her cheeks as she processed his words. He then declared he would inform the head maid that Riella was unwell, instructing her to go rest immediately. He surmised she had been hiding her injury out of fear of dismissal, attributing such a harsh condition to Ultos's relentless personality. With a grand, almost theatrical gesture, he urged her to recover quickly and return, reminding her that she was his only maid. Riella looked at him, softly uttering his title. As he walked away, he began to reflect, realizing that his casual approach to the situation was making him lose sight of what was truly right. He mused that he was responding more sensibly than Scamoltos himself. Suddenly, a profound realization struck him. He chastised himself for being a jerk, exclaiming that his actions were terribly wrong. With a renewed sense of urgency, he rushed back towards Riella, calling out her name, his expression one of concern. He bowed deeply, his posture conveying immense regret, and profusely apologized for misremembering her name earlier. He promised not to repeat the mistake and earnestly begged for her forgiveness. Riella watched him, speechless. Riella looked at him, again addressing him by his title. He continued his apology, expressing deep embarrassment for trying to cover up his mistake and for acting so thoughtlessly. From a lower vantage point, Riella offered him reassurance, stating that no one can navigate life without making mistakes. She added that even Ulto-sama, who could face failure, was truly admirable, and that everyone, including herself, had made errors, even breaking a treasured plate. Riella's reassurance left the male gamer in a state of deep thought, his brow furrowed with concern. She continued to smile, expressing her unwavering belief in Ulto-sama despite recent events, calling him a truly splendid person. Ulto-sama, visibly moved by her words, wiped a tear from his eye and thanked her, asking her to continue relying on him in the future. Riella affirmed her loyalty, stating that Ulto-sama was her only master, a character so great it was a shame she wouldn't appear in the main story. After this exchange, the male gamer, now embodying Scamultos, found himself walking alone down a grand hallway, reflecting that it was tough for a scum to become a mob and that he seemed to have cleared the first hurdle. Suddenly, a stern-faced maid, whom he recognized as the head maid, appeared, looking shocked. She immediately confronted him, her voice rising in alarm, questioning why the young master was walking alone and without holding a woman's hand. Ignoring her, Scamultos began a rigorous exercise regimen, grunting with effort as he performed push-ups, counting each repetition. He then paused, his expression serious, and declared his next focus would be on magic, specifically body enhancement. This body enhancement was the first magic learned in Last Arcanum, and while it was efficient for practice, it was also a sure bet for raising one's magic level in the early stages. As a noble from the world of Last Arcanum, Scamultos possessed a ridiculous amount of magical power, equal to his pedigree, allowing him to level up his magic to an absurd extent. Yet, despite this immense power, he lamented that in the game, it was only ever used for truly terrible deeds. He stood with his arms crossed, listening as the head maid informed him that Riella would return the following day. She offered a polite apology for interrupting him. A wave of relief washed over him, and he eagerly inquired if her hand had fully recovered. The head maid turned her back slightly, her expression unreadable, as she silently acknowledged that his sudden seriousness was not a jest after all. He watched her, a hint of confusion on his face. She then faced him directly, explaining that his abrupt shift in demeanor had led her to believe he might be toying with the servants, as was his past habit. He seemed taken aback by her bluntness. She continued, stating that recalling his past behavior was rather unsettling. Moments later, the head maid found herself alone, contemplating the young master's profound transformation. She realized she now had the daunting task of explaining this change to the rest of the household staff. He then clarified his understanding of Noblesse oblige, explaining that it meant someone with power and influence should use their social position to help others. He sought her confirmation. Her continued silence made him nervous, and he urged her to speak, his voice betraying a hint of impatience. She finally affirmed his understanding, confirming that his interpretation was correct. She assured him she would convey his new intentions to everyone in the household, and he expressed his trust in her. With a knowing smile, she mused that the young master was exactly as she had always expected him to be, a sentiment that left him slightly puzzled. Having successfully conveyed his new intentions to the head maid, Scamultos adjusted his glasses with a subtle, knowing smile. Internally, he celebrated his triumph, realizing that his elaborate plan to deceive them had worked perfectly. Even as he savored his success, a reflection of his former self, the male gamer, appeared in his mind. He pondered the concept of Noblesse oblige, the very principle he had just outwardly embraced. From the grand exterior of the mansion, his thoughts continued to drift, acknowledging that the true objective was to mitigate the impact of his past scummy behavior. He mused, renaming the principle in his mind. So it's like scumless oblige, isn't it? A young man stretched languidly in his opulent bed, a soft yawn escaping his lips as he greeted the new day. He then stepped outside, reflecting that it had been about half a year since his reincarnation into the world of Last Arc, a place he had grown quite accustomed to. He needed a moment to fully grasp his current situation. He realized his current identity was Ultos Randall, a character commonly known as Scamultos, a villain within this world. As he continued his rigorous push-up routine, he recalled his past life as a player who had utterly despised Scamultos. But a new thought emerged. If Scamultos had never existed, would Last Arc have truly become the masterpiece it was known to be? A vision of the corpulent Scamultos, enthroned and attended by two alluring women, materialized in his mind. He considered the dynamic of light and shadow, where light shines brighter in darkness and casts a deeper shadow. In this context, Scamultos was, in essence, the main character operating from the shadows, a figure whose presence defined the hero's journey. He then wondered if Scamultos was, in fact, the true main character, imagining a beautiful boy overwhelmed by immense magical power who met a tragic end. He urged himself to calm down, wrestling with these conflicting thoughts. The vision intensified, showing Scamultos, the Duke's heir, with glowing eyes, gleefully asserting his power over a terrified woman. He laughed maniacally, declaring that this made things even more exciting, while the woman pleaded for forgiveness, mentioning her fiancé. The young man, observing this mental projection, found Scamultos utterly despicable. He shook his head, realizing he had become sidetracked by his thoughts. He needed to refocus and sort out his current situation. He gripped the bamboo sword, his expression grim as he recalled the grim fate of Scamultos in the original story, an unpleasant end in every single route, whether by stabbing, poisoning, strangulation, or beheading. He realized with chilling clarity that if he continued on this path, he too would meet a horrible death. The thought of such an end was indeed a problem. He remembered a time when he had practiced kendo, swinging a bamboo sword with fierce determination. He felt a flicker of gratitude for having joined the kendo club, even if he had quit rather quickly. He continued to practice his swings, acknowledging that while he had dabbled in kendo, A bamboo sword was fundamentally different from a real blade. His club-level kendo might not prove very useful in this new world, he mused, especially since most of the swords here lacked the familiar curve. He concluded that his immediate priority should be to build up his basic strength before attempting to learn the specific techniques of this realm. With a resolute expression, he closed his eyes, reaffirming his absolute refusal to meet an unpleasant end, despite his reincarnation into the world of his beloved last arc. However, a spark ignited in his eyes as he realized the immense advantage he possessed, extensive knowledge gleaned from thoroughly playing the original game. Standing in a well-appointed room, he declared his new objective. He would use his game knowledge as a cheat to attain a peaceful life. His ultimate goal was to become a mere background character, a mob, and he specifically considered body enhancement as a means to achieve this. As he observed an hourglass, he acknowledged that even a mob could not afford to be powerless in times of crisis. Therefore, it was imperative to raise both his physical and magical levels. Now dressed in more formal attire, he stood resolute, outlining his strategy. Repeatedly performing body enhancement was the most efficient method to level up magic, and he intended to maintain this enhanced state to its absolute limit. He held an hourglass, observing the duration of his body enhancement. Since he lacked a status screen to track his progress, he decided to use time as his benchmark, beginning his test with a 3-minute target. As he looked up, he noticed the most significant difference between the game and reality: the constant, visible leaking of magic power from his body. This made maintaining body enhancement incredibly tough, a stark contrast to the game's simplified mechanics. The magic continued to leak, causing visible distortions in the air around him. He pondered if such an uncontrolled outpouring of power was seriously dangerous, a concern he never had in the game. He recalled his knowledge of the game, understanding that body enhancement inherently caused magic to leak from the entire body due to its very nature. The amount of overflowing magic, he realized, served as an indicator of its strength. 2 minutes had passed. He had attempted to suppress the magic leakage, but doing so only caused the body enhancement to wear off prematurely. He concluded that the magic leakage from the skill simply could not be controlled. He remembered that in the game, Ultos, with his noble lineage, possessed an absurd amount of magic. When he used body enhancement, this magic leaked uncontrollably, making him appear overwhelmingly strong to others. He realized that if he, a character from a good family, tried to hide his identity while using such a skill, his true power would definitely be exposed. He stared ahead, a grim realization dawning. Body enhancement could only be used for leveling up. As someone determined to remain a mere mob, he absolutely had to avoid standing out. He lamented that trying to be overpowered with body enhancement would be a complete waste of his reincarnation into last arc. He wiped his brow, visibly exhausted, as 18 minutes had now passed. Despite the struggle, he had achieved a new record for maintaining the enhancement. Suddenly, a maid named Riella appeared, startling him. She cheerfully congratulated him on achieving his new record. He was startled by Riella's sudden appearance, questioning when she had arrived. She calmly informed him that she had been present the entire time, noting his complete unawareness of her presence. He admitted his oversight, attributing it to being overly focused on his training, and resolved to be more careful in the future. Riella simply smiled, her expression gentle. Despite his previous oversight, he couldn't help but observe Riella, finding her smile both beautiful and undeniably cute. She then offered her assistance, explaining that she had just finished her cleaning duties. Maid Riella, though appearing to be in her mid-teens, possessed a figure that defied her apparent youth, prompting an internal reflection on the design choices behind her creation. She observed her master, noting his troubled demeanor. With a gentle inquiry, she offered, "If it's okay with you, would you like to talk to Riella?" He, however, found the idea of having such a personal maid, especially one so alluring, to be a form of exquisite torture, fearing any inappropriate interaction would end poorly. He acknowledged her, speaking her name softly. She, in turn, smiled brightly, sensing his distress and confirming his internal thought that she was indeed a good girl. He reflected on his past self, Scamultos, admonishing himself to consider his past actions, particularly how he had relentlessly bullied such a kind and innocent person. She looked on, her expression a mix of innocence and slight confusion, perhaps sensing the weight of his internal struggle. Moments later, a delicate tea service was arranged on a small table, signaling a more formal conversation. He explained his primary concern to Riella, stating that he worried about the significant amount of magical power released during body enhancement, especially since he possessed more than others and did not wish for it to be too conspicuous. She, however, misinterpreted his words, believing he simply did not wish to show off his power. He hesitated, then conceded that one could perhaps say that, though it was not his true meaning. He internally noted her misunderstanding, realizing she was interpreting his concerns in a positive, yet incorrect, way. He also considered the substantial and wasteful loss of magical power, which was far greater than he had initially thought. He found her cute and comforting, but acknowledged that simply asking Riella would not solve his underlying problem. She hummed softly, still oblivious to the true nature of his dilemma, which he found troubling. Still troubled by the inefficiency of body enhancement, he listened as Maid Riella suddenly exclaimed, her eyes wide with a thought. She then explained that she often failed when attempting many tasks at once, frequently breaking dishes. But since the head maid instructed her to focus on one thing at a time, her failures had significantly decreased. He wondered if she was simply a clumsy girl. Leaning forward, Riella then offered what she called an amateur idea, asking if concentrating magical power in a single spot or something similar might be a bad approach. Her suggestion hung in the air, emphasized by the distinctive heart-shaped cutout of her maid uniform. The mention of concentrating power in one spot struck him, and his eyes widened in sudden realization. He quickly turned to her, asking for clarification. "I'm listening. Concentrate the magical power in one spot, right?" Riella, slightly confused, simply responded, "Master." Considering her idea, he concluded it was not bad and could potentially improve the efficiency of magical power. He decided to try it out immediately. With a determined expression, he focused his will, initiating a new technique: body enhancement, concentration. A surge of energy manifested in his open palm, crackling with raw power. He stared at his hand in astonishment, a triumphant exclamation escaping his lips. "Oh, I did it." He extended his hand, feeling a strange hardness where the magical energy had just surged, only for it to vanish moments later. As Maid Riella looked on with a puzzled expression, he realized the profound implications. This kind of magic, a partial enhancement that left no visible trace, simply did not exist in the original work. This was a dangerous, yet exhilarating, development. She questioned why she couldn't see the magical power, to which he explained that he had just performed a partial enhancement. He noted with surprise that, for some reason, the magical power did not leak much from the enhanced part, making it virtually undetectable. He mused on the immense advantage this unique magic presented, a power that existed outside the game's known mechanics, and that no other character could wield. However, a flicker of caution crossed his mind. He couldn't be entirely certain he was the sole user. He resolved to proceed with utmost care. Later, sitting across from Maid Riella at a table, he expressed his gratitude. He explained that thanks to her simple idea, he could now enjoy body enhancement without the risk of exposure, though he acknowledged that training it to a practical level would still be a significant challenge. She beamed with delight, exclaiming her happiness at being able to assist her master. He then turned serious, asking her to keep the partial enhancement a complete secret from everyone, emphasizing that its widespread knowledge would strip him of his crucial advantage. Maid Riella, surprised, asked if this meant the secret would be exclusively theirs. He hesitated for a moment, then confirmed her understanding. Her face flushed crimson, her eyes widening in a mixture of shock and profound emotion at the implication of their shared secret. A few weeks later, the city skyline stretched under a rising sun, marking the passage of time since the discovery of the unique enhancement technique. During this period, he diligently practiced, refining his control over the partial enhancement, swinging a bat, sliding, and running with newfound, subtle power. His efforts bore fruit, as he now confidently demonstrated the body enhancement, partial concentration, extending his hand with a focused gaze. He reflected that, as expected of Scamoltos, the practice over the past few weeks was showing results, and he was getting quite used to concentrating magical power. Maid Riella observed him intently, confirming that she still couldn't tell which hand he was enhancing, even after looking closely. She realized the technique was indeed undetectable, making it incredibly difficult to discern during combat. He confirmed his mastery, stating that the body enhancement, concentration consumed a ridiculously small amount of magical power, allowing him to keep it activated for hours if he wished. Despite the efficiency, he mused that even in the same world of Last Arcanum, there were slight differences, as it was impossible to hide magical power in the original game. But here, he could conceal it. He then turned to Riella, asking if the partial enhancement was her idea, to which she proudly affirmed, "Of course." He added that he had never heard of anyone else who could perform such a feat. Considering the implications, he concluded that this technique Riella had thought of was probably a cheat skill, a power far beyond normal capabilities. Riella's eyes widened in surprise, questioning if it was truly a cheat skill. He admitted he couldn't say for sure, but probably, especially since Ultos was only a strong character in the early game, implying this new ability drastically altered his potential. He considered the implications of his new technique, knowing that while the main characters of the later game would eventually surpass him, becoming cheat-level strong, his current abilities made him relatively weak in comparison. But with this technique, he believed, things could change. Maid Riella then approached him, asking if he had considered a new game, eagerly offering to play alongside him. He seemed taken aback, pondering if this mid-game technique would even be effective in the late game, or if it wouldn't work at all. He decided to name the technique mob-style body enhancement, finding it inconvenient to refer to it without a proper designation. Both he and Maid Riella chuckled with delight at the thought. The Grand Duke Randall's mansion stood majestically under a clear sky, its many windows reflecting the light. Inside, Ultos Randall found himself troubled, his arms crossed as he pondered a significant choice. He wondered which path he should choose next. As he contemplated, Riella, the maid, approached him with a tray holding a teapot and cup. She greeted him, asking if he was troubled by something again, having brought him some tea. He explained that he had built up his basic strength and now wished to begin learning swordsmanship. He then sought her advice, asking whether it would be better to learn from the knights or the mercenaries. She reacted with visible shock at the mention of mercenaries, her eyes wide with surprise. He, noticing her strong reaction, questioned her sudden alarm. She then earnestly advised him, stating that as the heir to the Duke's family, it would be far better for him to learn from the Randall Knights. She emphasized that most knights were sons of noble families, highly loyal and refined. He pondered her words, considering the implications of training with the knights. Meanwhile, information gathered from the head maid revealed that the Ultos family's Duke Randall household maintained two distinct forces, the knights and the mercenaries. These knights were essentially a police or military force, professionals in combat against people, whose duties were to protect Duke Randall and maintain the security of the territory. In contrast, the mercenaries were made up of adventurers, known for their extensive combat experience and a wide range of fighting techniques. They were mainly responsible for eliminating monsters that invaded the territory. He continued to ponder his training options, stating that since he desired survival skills, mercenaries were the clear choice. However, Maid Riella firmly countered, insisting that for a young master, the knights were the only acceptable path. Her brow furrowed with concern, a bead of sweat tracing her temple as she considered his stubbornness. Despite her apprehension, he rose with a determined expression, declaring, "All right, let's go." She watched him, a thought forming in her mind. Did he forget? Moments later, they stood before the imposing walls of the mercenary training ground, a formidable fortress that loomed under the sky. As he took in the sight, a wave of dread washed over him. His eyes widened in shock, and he realized, this is bad. So this is what it means to have your legs shake in fear, His face was etched with anxiety, sweat beading on his forehead. He thought to himself, I just want to practice my swings at home and feel like I'm getting stronger. The harsh reality of this place was stark. This isn't a game. If you get punched, it hurts. And if you get cut, you bleed. The fear intensified, and he imagined a grim fate, a bad ending, where he lay defeated. He desperately thought, I don't want to die like that. I need the strength to protect myself. Riella, noticing his distress, gently suggested they return home. He silently echoed her sentiment. I want to go home. Yet, despite the overwhelming fear, a flicker of resolve ignited within him. He took a determined step forward, his voice trembling but firm as he declared, Take me on. Riella followed, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. Inside the training grounds, a collection of hardened mercenaries observed the new arrivals, their faces grim and their postures imposing. One of the mercenaries chuckled, remarking that the rumors of the young master losing weight were true, and questioned his presence, especially with a girl by his side. Another mercenary, equally skeptical, wondered aloud why the young master had come to their domain. He stood before the mercenaries, requesting swordsmanship training. One of the hardened men, a broad-shouldered figure with a mustache, chuckled dismissively, finding the young master's request amusing. Altos, however, sensed the rough, unwelcoming atmosphere from these adventurers, hired for money. The other mercenary, a man with a stern expression and a mohawk, then spoke, informing Altos that they had no big-breasted, bikini-armored female adventurers ready for him, though he admitted it was a shame the young master had come there. He reacted with a stunned, his eyes wide with confusion at the unexpected statement. The mercenary, seeing his confusion, pressed him, asking if he truly did not remember. He then reminded Altos of a previous visit with the Duke, where he had thrown a huge fit. Altos, meanwhile, internally questioned what the man was talking about, regretting that he hadn't taken the Scamoltos route instead. The mercenary continued, detailing how Altos had thrown a fit and then left, explicitly demanding that he would not train unless there was a big-breasted, bikini-armored female adventurer present. The mustached mercenary smirked, clearly enjoying the recollection. Altos turned to Riella, his maid, his expression a mix of disbelief and concern, asking if what they said was true. She looked away, her face flushed with embarrassment. She thought to herself, calling him Scamoltos, the worst perverted brat, and wondering if he was serious. He paused, reflecting on the concept of bikini armor. He mused that it was equipment men loved, a staple of fantasy works since ancient times, and truly a fan favorite. He wondered if it was really something to be laughed at. His thoughts continued, recalling how the paid DLC versions of such armor were particularly dangerous, and how he had blown his bonus completing the collection. He finally concluded that the problem was not the bikini armor itself, but the fact that the Duke's heir had made such a specific, perverted demand for his training. He attempted to retract his previous demand, stating firmly that he no longer required a big-breasted, bikini-armored female adventurer for swordsmanship training. However, the head maid, with a stern expression, informed him that they would contact him only when such an adventurer was ready, and for today, he should take his leave. The mercenaries, gathered in the training hall, refused to let him off so easily. They insisted that as the Duke's heir, he should not retract his words lightly, implying it was a shame if there were no big-breasted, bikini-armored adventurer for them to gladly teach swordsmanship. He internally despaired, realizing they were treating him as a troublemaker. The mockery continued as the mercenaries openly discussed the absurdity of the situation, with one exclaiming that anything larger than what was already present would be a monstrosity. Nearby, a female adventurer, her face flushed with embarrassment, clutched at her chest, murmuring that it wasn't that big. Still reeling from the public humiliation, he stood silently as Maid Riella, ever supportive, tried to reassure him. She gently reminded him that she had done her best as he had instructed, implying she had followed his original, perverted request. He recoiled in horror, internally screaming at himself not to fall into such traps. He had been trying to avoid such trashy situations and blend in as a background character, but now he had completely failed. Riella, still trying to be helpful, asked what he was making her do, calling him Scamoltos. A group of adventurers, led by a man with a distinctive mohawk and mustache, expressed their reluctance to get involved. They worried that associating with that infamous scumbag would tarnish their reputation. Furthermore, they stated that the maid did not meet the conditions set by the young master, making any involvement a non-starter. Meanwhile, the young master, Altos, offered to train the maid himself. He internally mused that he was already disliked, even before his full-scale transformation into a scumbag had truly begun. The maid, surprised by his offer, attempted to interject. The adventurer leader, taken aback, questioned the young master's decision. However, a tall, confident man named Enrique stepped forward, asserting that the young master possessed a good maid. He then countered the leader's concerns, explaining that if he handled the training personally, there would be no issue. Enrique further swayed the leader by pointing out that if the maid were sent away, they would never again see her in bikini armor. The leader, quickly understanding Enrique's reasoning, agreed that treating the maid lovingly, as Enrique suggested, was acceptable. Enrique's commanding presence silenced everyone in the vicinity. Altos and the maid observed him, with Altos wondering if this imposing figure was the true leader of the group. Altos continued to scrutinize Enrique, noticing the calluses on his hands, a clear sign that he wielded a sword daily. He realized that Enrique hadn't merely lost weight. He was in excellent physical condition, a completely different person from the one Altos had known before. With the adventurers gathered, Enrique addressed Altos and the maid. He proposed a test match with the young master before commencing any training, stating his desire to first assess Altos' current skill level. Altos, his eyes narrowed in determination, accepted the challenge. He mentally braced himself, ready for the impending confrontation. As Altos stood before a rack of wooden swords, he considered the potential dangers. He knew that even a wooden sword could inflict significant pain, and a stroke of bad luck could easily result in a broken bone. He questioned whether Enrique would truly engage in a serious fight with someone as young as himself. Enrique then demonstrated his prowess, swiftly swinging a wooden sword with practiced ease, the blade cutting through the air with a sharp whistle. Altos watched his movements intently. After witnessing Enrique's skill, Altos turned to the adventurer leader, asking about Enrique's rank. The leader appeared surprised by the question, his expression indicating that it was a significant inquiry. He was then confronted by the female adventurer, who demanded to know what he had done to get his rank stripped. The protagonist, observing Enrique, noted a distinct deadbeat vibe about him. Enrique, with a casual smile, admitted that the guild had indeed stripped his rank, finding it rather embarrassing. Meanwhile, the head maid, holding a duster, reflected on a mercenary group that was once excellent, lamenting that now all the skilled adventurers had fled the area. The protagonist, overhearing her, inquired why the guild had run away. She explained that the guild's reputation had hit rock bottom, largely because the prodigy of the house had begun to act strangely. She then detailed the adventurer ranking system, from SSS, world-renowned, down to F, apprentice, noting that most mercenary groups nowadays consisted of F-rank adventurers. Later, the protagonist stood alone, carefully examining a practice sword. He mused that Enrique had been about to say E earlier, concluding with certainty that Enrique was originally an F-rank adventurer. With a determined stride, he declared that he would test just how well he fared against an F-rank, confident that it would be no problem. His declaration led him to a large training arena, where he and Enrique now stood facing each other, surrounded by an expectant crowd. Enrique, holding his sword, calmly told the young master he was ready whenever he was. The protagonist, though admitting to himself that Enrique seemed scary, then expressed a surge of excitement, raising his practiced sword in preparation. Enrique watched him, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. He lowered his gaze slightly, his confident smirk unwavering. Across the arena, the protagonist's eyes gleamed with fierce determination, reflecting his newfound resolve. With a powerful shout, he lunged forward, his practiced sword extended, initiating the duel. He lunged forward, practiced sword raised high, aiming a powerful overhead strike at Enrique, who reacted with a startled expression. Enrique swiftly dodged the attack, his body twisting out of the way as the practiced sword slammed into the ground, sending him sprawling. He remarked to himself that it had been a close call. From the sidelines, the female adventurer observed, noting that while the young master's movements were quite straightforward, he was surprisingly good. The adventurer leader agreed, while Enrique internally mused that he had managed to dodge a standard counter technique only because he was familiar with it. He wondered if that was truly the case. Enrique, now radiating a faint aura of power, declared that if the young master could not utilize body enhancement, then this entire exercise was a waste of time. He warned that he would end the duel with his very next move. The young master, however, simply smiled, acknowledging his current limitation without body enhancement, admitting he couldn't even handle an F-rank opponent. Yet, he thought, he still wanted to try that. The female adventurer watched him intently, wondering if the young master was indeed going to attempt that. Enrique, observing the young master's determined stance, noted that he didn't appear to have given up yet. Suddenly, the young master lunged forward again, his fist glowing with an intense light, catching Enrique completely off guard and eliciting a surprised exclamation from him. Enrique recoiled in shock as the young master, now fully enveloped in a radiant aura, confidently declared that he had the situation under control. Altos lunged forward, his sword aimed directly at Enrique, shouting that he had him. Enrique, however, met the attack with a firm block, his eyes narrowed in concentration as he parried the blow. The two swordsmen continued their intense spar, blades clashing repeatedly as Altos pressed his attack, forcing Enrique to defend. Suddenly, he found himself caught off guard, realizing his mistake just as Enrique's blade connected, striking him with a sharp impact. He recoiled, surprised that he had managed to dodge the full force of the blow, a realization dawning on him. Enrique, observing his student, explained that the crucial element in combat was closing the distance carefully and precisely. Taking his instructor's words to heart, Altos moved with renewed purpose, his footwork swift and decisive as he rapidly closed the gap between them. His eyes, now filled with an intense, unwavering focus, locked onto his opponent. With a powerful push, his foot dug into the ground, propelling him forward with explosive speed. He unleashed a swift, precise strike, catching Enrique off balance and sending his sword flying from his grasp. He was violently thrown backward, crashing through debris with immense force, the impact sending shockwaves through the training ground. The onlookers gasped in shock at the sudden turn of events, while Enrique, witnessing the impact, muttered a curse, and the maid looked on with wide, worried eyes. He landed heavily on the ground, debris scattering around him, and let out a pained grunt as dust billowed up. Still on the ground, he struggled to catch his breath, gasping for air and feeling a crushing pressure in his chest. He continued to cough violently, clutching his chest, as the maid, concerned, asked if the young master was all right. With tears welling in his eyes, he retorted that he had been thrown about 3 meters and was clearly not okay. He then confronted Enrique, demanding to know why he had been kicked with such force, reminding him that he was only 10 years old and that if his clothes hadn't been fortified with a mob-style defense technique, his organs would have ruptured. He also questioned if this was truly swordsmanship training. Enrique, with a slight smile, apologized to the young master, explaining that he had gotten carried away because Altos was making such good moves. He noted that Altos was still moving, indicating his resilience. The maid, still in her revealing attire, scolded Enrique not to get cocky just because he won, stating that she didn't care for the praise of an F rank. Meanwhile, Altos continued to cough, feeling humiliated by the counterkick, while maid Riella looked on, confused. The maid then declared that if the young master were serious, he could defeat someone like Enrique with just his pinky finger, insisting that he was just nervous because it was his first match. Altos, still on the ground, desperately told her to stop, finding it embarrassing, while Enrique looked on, seemingly amused. He watched as the maid coughed, her face flushed with embarrassment after her outburst. She then questioned Enrique, asking where he had learned to move with such skill, before quickly asserting that the young master was, in fact, very strong. The sparring arena remained a spectacle, with numerous onlookers observing Enrique standing tall, the maid nearby, and Altos still recovering on the ground. He looked up, his eyes wide with the sudden realization that everyone present was awaiting his next words. He internally resolved to think calmly, strategizing what kind of cutting remark would inflict the most damage, deciding to unleash a barrage of complaints and snark upon the F-rank adventurer. His mind raced through potential reactions. One path involved acting like a spoiled brat, boasting of his amazingness and throwing a tantrum after losing the mock battle. The other, more subtle approach, was to embody the useless, bikini armor-loving noble who had skipped training his whole life, yet confidently engaged in a mock battle, only to then offer a sarcastic apology for being injured. His expression remained serious, his brow furrowed in deep contemplation as he weighed his options. He concluded that his ultimate goal was to remain a background figure, a mob character, and in this precise situation, the correct action was to behave accordingly. He acknowledged the kick had been undeniably painful, and that his earlier thought of a sarcastic apology was indeed a jerk move. With a genuine smile, he rose to his feet, thanking them for their concern and assuring everyone that he was perfectly fine. Enrique and the maid watched him as he declared, with a slight laugh, that while he had been confident, real combat proved to be much tougher than anticipated. He then playfully vowed to knock Enrique out someday. The young master accepted the training, stating his understanding. Enrique, observing the interaction, found himself laughing, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. Maid Riella, standing nearby, looked on with a hint of concern. With the training concluded, the young master announced their departure, and Riella, ever diligent, confirmed their return. As they left, Enrique remained, his expression thoughtful, a subtle intensity in his gaze. Meanwhile, other adventurers observed from the battlements, remarking on the young master's transformation. One noted that not only his appearance, but his entire demeanor had changed, while another conceded that the boy possessed true guts. They continued their discussion, expressing disbelief that the young master had taken Enrique's kick and remained seemingly unfazed. One adventurer questioned if Enrique had held back during the strike. Enrique, hearing their comments, offered a vague, non-committal response, a slight huh, and oh, escaping his lips. He internally grappled with what he had witnessed, struggling to accept the reality of the young master's movements, even as his companions continued to discuss the cute girl in the bikini armor and whether they had truly seen the young master's speed. His thoughts turned to the sheer power of the young master's last strike, realizing that taking such a blow directly would crush ribs and force an adventurer into retirement. He concluded that he had not had the luxury to hold back, confirming that his kick had been a reflexive, full-power strike. Turning to Jose, the D-rank adventurer, Enrique challenged him directly, asking if he believed he could withstand such a kick that would leave him bedridden for 3 weeks. He questioned Jose, asking if he truly believed a regular person could withstand his kick and remain unharmed. Jose, looking puzzled, asked what he meant. Jose responded, asserting that no ordinary individual, not even an A-rank adventurer, could endure a kick from Enrique, a former S-rank adventurer. Enrique simply confirmed Jose's understanding with a serious expression. He then reflected on the young master, Scamoltos, who had taken his powerful kick head-on, yet calmly rose and stood. Enrique found it intriguing, wondering what trick Scamoltos had employed, noting that while he must have used body reinforcement, there was no discernible sign of magical leakage. Furthermore, Enrique recalled that Scamoltos' movements were far from amateurish, feeling instead like the culmination of an incredible amount of fundamental training. Meanwhile, the female adventurer, who had also witnessed the young master's training, found herself pondering the events. She questioned if the person she had seen was truly a maid, and what felt most out of place about the entire situation. Her thoughts briefly fixated on the big-chested bikini armor, finding its very existence outrageous. She quickly dismissed that superficial observation, realizing it wasn't the core of her unease. Instead, she focused on the maid's unwavering determination, which contradicted the rumors she had heard about the young master being abandoned by everyone in the manor. The pieces simply did not add up. As she pieced everything together, a startling conclusion became clear. The young master's reputation as a lazy, perverted brat was nothing more than a carefully constructed fake. She recalled the instances of him chasing after maids, his apparent obesity, and his refusal to study, now understanding them as deliberate acts to maintain his deceptive persona. She realized that all of the young master's seemingly perverted and lazy actions, even the forced, in moments, were merely a deception for the public eye. Meanwhile, the young master, Ultos, stood with a subtle, knowing smile, a powerful tiger appearing behind him as if a manifestation of his true intent. He was clearly plotting something significant. Elsewhere, Enrique, observing from a distance, confirmed his suspicions. The Ultos prodigy remained entirely intact, his true capabilities hidden beneath a carefully crafted facade. Enrique then turned to Jose, informing him that things were finally starting and asking if he was ready. Jose, surprised, questioned what was happening. Enrique explained that the young master had likely realized something serious and had to take measures. To prepare for this, he had played the role of a lazy, perverted brat to deceive the world. Jose, still processing the revelation, wondered if Enrique had flipped another strange switch. Enrique, however, simply chuckled, finding the situation increasingly interesting, noting that starting serious training meant things were truly about to begin. Far from their conversation, the Grand Randall family mansion stood majestically under a cloudy sky. Inside the mansion, Ultos lay in bed, groaning in discomfort, complaining that his stomach hurt and that Enrique was annoying him. Maid Riella stood nearby, looking concerned. Riella approached him, excusing herself before announcing that she would change his compress. As she leaned over him, Riella gently instructed him not to move, assuring him that she, Riella, would take good care of him. Ultos, blushing and wide-eyed, internally remarked that changing a compress like this truly felt like the world of an 18-plus game. While Ultos Randall continued his feigned illness, Maid Riella found herself in a state of growing unease. She looked down, a deep concern etched on her face, realizing that something else was beginning to ache painfully within her. Her concern for him was evident as she knelt beside his bed, observing his supposed discomfort. She gently reminded him that he hadn't relied on her much lately, offering her unwavering comfort should he ever find things difficult. Ultos, seizing the opportunity, dramatically declared his current state to be tough. He, still maintaining his facade, smiled broadly, remarking on her pleasant scent. He then asked her to move away for a moment, expressing his sincere appreciation for her loyalty. Riella, however, looked on with a slightly displeased and confused expression. As she departed, offering further assistance should he need it, Ultos let out a sigh of relief. He internally acknowledged that he had narrowly avoided a bad ending with his Scamultos move, indicating the precarious nature of his act. With Riella gone, his thoughts turned to the implications of her devotion. He pondered if the original Scamultos' inflated ego in the main storyline was a direct result of Riella's loyalty, which he believed was significantly boosted by his constant feeding of her affections. He considered the implications of her devotion, concluding that it was indeed possible. Lying in bed, he realized that Riella, despite her loyalty, might actually be the one he needed to be most cautious of in this new world. A sudden pang of discomfort, however, drew his attention away from Riella. He winced, clutching his stomach, and cursed Enrique, wondering what was truly wrong with the man. He recalled Enrique, a man he mentally dismissed as a perpetual F-rank failure of an adventurer with a distinct loser vibe, a thought that brought a slight, mocking smile to his face. Despite his dismissive thoughts, he found a strange contentment in labeling Enrique a mob character he had never encountered in the game, reinforcing his sense of superiority and control over the narrative. Reflecting on his own capabilities, he acknowledged that he was currently just below an F-rank adventurer, yet he had still managed to keep pace with the unfolding events, a testament to his cunning and adaptability. Within his opulent chambers, Ultos stretched, feeling the last vestiges of the injury inflicted by Enrique finally healing. He mused that it was perhaps time to resume his swordsmanship training. He was then approached by a maid, who announced the arrival of his magic instructor, Master Ultos, and offered to assist him in dressing. His shock intensified as he recognized the instructor. He internally questioned why she was here, struggling to process the unexpected appearance of Carla Sensei, also known as Carla Orlando or Irish John, one of the main heroines from the game, Last Arcanum, a character renowned for her overwhelming beauty and formidable presence. He understood that in the game, she was a magic caster who had honed her arcane arts to the extreme, becoming incredibly powerful and an invaluable, permanent member of the protagonist's party by the late game. He realized with growing dread that there was nothing in the official lore about encountering a main character this early, questioning if this deviation was a bad omen. He reminded himself of his current predicament. He had been reincarnated as a trash-tier character and was striving to live as a mere background mob. The main storyline of Last Arcanum was still 4.5 years away. To avoid the tragic death that awaited him as a trash villain, He knew he simply needed to blend into the background before the story truly began, regardless of which route unfolded. Despite his efforts to stop acting like a scumbag, which had even improved the servants' opinions of him, and his initiation of sword training to ensure his survival, he found himself meeting a main character at this critical, early time. He recalled Carla-sensei's role in the original game. She was the one who worked behind the scenes to strip Scamoltos, his original character, of his noble rank and throw him into a prison cell, all for the sake of saving the protagonist, Seek. He concluded that he must, by any means, avoid getting involved with Carla-sensei, wondering if some kind of storyline force was already at play, pulling him towards his predetermined fate. Carla-sensei's gaze held a subtle hint of inquiry, as if sensing the turmoil within Altos or perhaps questioning the unexpected turn of events herself. Her unexpected arrival left Altos stunned, while the maid, ever diligent, addressed him, asking if he was all right. Altos could only manage a soft "oh," still processing the sight before him. As she stood before him, Altos, regaining his composure, introduced himself as Altos Randall. Carla-sensei, however, seemed more interested in his physical state, remarking that he had gotten quite thin, then questioned who he was. He realized with a jolt that Carla-sensei was standing right in front of him, her face and voice exactly as he remembered from the game. Her striking attire, with its revealing cut and intricate details, was even more impactful in person. He mused internally that seeing such an outfit in real life felt practically criminal, a thought that lingered as he considered her overall appearance. Suddenly, she spoke, her voice sharp, asking him where he thought he was looking, and accusing him of still being a pervy brat despite his weight loss. She declared it totally unfair. The maid quickly interjected, defending Altos by exclaiming that he was not a pervy brat, merely a little pervy. Altos reacted with a surprised gasp. She merely smiled, a knowing look on her face, and told Altos that even if his servant said otherwise, he now knew what people truly thought of him deep down. He pondered why she was treating him so differently compared to the protagonist of the game, feeling a thumping in his chest as he witnessed Carla-sensei's smug expression. Then, her expression softened, and she offered a surprising piece of advice, telling him it was acceptable to lean on others sometimes, and not to push himself too hard. She held him close, a comforting gesture that stirred a deep, melancholic realization within Altos. He reflected on a past where he, not the current protagonist, had been the one experiencing such moments, and a wave of sadness washed over him, threatening to bring him to tears. After her comforting embrace, Carla-sensei stood before Altos, her demeanor shifting as she announced her purpose, to deliver the results of his magic aptitude test. She requested a private meeting, a suggestion Altos noted was delivered with an uncharacteristic rudeness. A maid confirmed the availability of a private room and offered to lead the way. As they began to move, Altos watched Carla-sensei and the maid walk ahead. He already knew the test results, thanks to his knowledge of the game, but the request for a private discussion, a standard practice for personal matters like magic aptitude, still left him with a lingering sense of unease. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp sound. Altos turned, startled, as Carla-sensei stumbled, her expression one of surprise. He quickly inquired about her well-being. Suddenly, without warning, she lost her footing completely, her body collapsing to the ground with a soft thud. He watched, stunned, as she lay on the floor. His eyes widened in disbelief, realizing she had simply tripped over nothing at all. She had fallen. The magic instructor, Carla-sensei, lay sprawled on the floor, having apparently tripped. A maid, Riella, rushed to her side, asking if she was all right, while Altos looked on with a concerned expression. She, seemingly unfazed, began to pat down her witch's hat, then calmly placed it back on her head, attempting to brush off the incident. Despite her efforts, the maid, Riella, gently clarified that Carla-sensei had indeed just tripped, causing the instructor to look up with a surprised, almost bewildered expression. Altos, observing the exchange, internally mused about Carla-sensei's true nature, acknowledging her competence and beauty, but also her undeniable clumsiness, concluding that she was the real deal in her endearing messiness. The maid, Riella, blushing slightly, quickly assured Carla-sensei that it was nothing and offered to continue guiding her. Carla-sensei, her expression now serious, simply accepted the offer. As they continued their walk through the grand halls of the mansion, Altos reflected on the maid's quick thinking, realizing that Riella had played along to save Carla-sensei from further embarrassment, and that the incident was far from nothing. He also noted the presence of other staff, including a dark-haired maid and a butler, going about their duties. Later, seated across from Altos at a table, Carla-sensei adopted a grave tone, stating that before revealing his results, she had something important to say. She was quitting as his tutor. She continued, explaining that while she had taught many noble children, she had never encountered anyone as lacking in class as him, expressing genuine confusion as to how someone could turn out that way. Altos, meanwhile, internally congratulated himself, believing he had successfully dodged a bullet. He then offered a wide, relieved grin, confirming his internal thought that he had indeed dodged a significant problem. His secret relief was short-lived as Carla-sensei, sensing his true feelings, fixed him with an intense gaze and demanded to know what he found so amusing. Caught off guard by her direct question, he stammered an apology, claiming he was distracted by her beauty and had missed most of what she was saying, though he admitted this was only half true. Unconvinced by his flattery, she sternly accused him of ogling her body with weird eyes and grinning to himself like a creep during her lectures, ordering him to listen properly. Despite her stern warning, his mind continued to wander, recalling how he had even asked her to teach him spells to make girls' clothes see-through or to peep on them in the bath. Having heard enough of his inappropriate requests and behavior, Carla-sensei declared her decision to quit, stating that today would be her last day. He accepted her resignation, internally labeling his own actions as classic scamoltos. Before her departure, she presented him with a document, explaining that his magic appraisal had taken an unusually long time because she had never encountered such a result before. As she began to explain the rarity of his magical attribute, revealing it to be spatial magic, he abruptly cut her off, stating he already knew from playing a game. Her explanation cut short. Carla-sensei looked at him with surprise, asking what was wrong and reminding him of the significant effort it took to uncover such a rare attribute. Sighing at his apparent lack of enthusiasm, she decided to explain it more clearly, instructing him to listen carefully as she revealed that spatial magic was, in fact, a legendary class. She continued, revealing even more profound implications of his rare ability. According to ancient lore, spatial magic was the very power utilized by the final boss, yet also by the one destined to fight that same ultimate foe. In the distance, a formidable castle loomed as Ultos, Carla-sensei, and another figure began their journey towards it. He, having just been granted legendary spatial magic, expressed his genuine lack of thrill. He explained that the original Scamoltos only ever used spatial magic for perverted acts, and being chosen felt like the antithesis of his desire to be a mere mob character. Carla-sensei, however, questioned why he wasn't more excited about wielding a power so few could master. The original Scamoltos had indeed used his power for depraved acts, making walls transparent to peep on girls in the bath, flipping up their skirts, and eventually even rendering their clothes invisible. This accelerated his descent into a full-blown scumbag persona, leading every single girl in school to despise him. Ultos reflected on this, acknowledging that while it might have been amusing from a player's perspective, it was undoubtedly pure hell from Scamoltos' point of view. He mused that if he were in that position, he would much rather have normal magic instead. He continued his internal thoughts, concluding that instead of making walls or clothes invisible, if he possessed such power, he would simply make himself vanish. Carla-sensei, sitting opposite him at a table, processed his words. She wondered if he had truly just expressed a desire for normal magic. She paused, a realization dawning on her. Normally, he would be ecstatic about such power, but he wanted to disappear. She questioned what that truly implied. A profound thought struck her. Could those words have been his true feelings? As Ultos looked down, lost in thought, Carla-sensei considered that perhaps he feared hurting people with such overwhelming magic. Or perhaps, somewhere deep down, he always knew the immense power he held. She concluded that when she truly considered it, his pretense of being a dumb, scummy noble to keep others away made total sense. Having come to a profound understanding of Ultos' inner turmoil, she offered him a gentle, reassuring smile. She declared that she had changed her mind and would never abandon him. His eyes widened in utter disbelief at her unexpected words, a stark huh, escaping him as he processed the weight of her promise. Carla Orland, as she introduced herself, was publicly regarded as a cool-headed genius. Her reputation was such that top-tier spellcasters from the Royal Capital's Mage Guild and the Magic Academy held her in high esteem. She continued, a slight smirk playing on her lips, acknowledging that some even went so far as to call her the greatest spellcaster of their time. However, she then revealed a stark contrast to her public persona, admitting that she was not fond of interacting with others. Truthfully, she hated it and actively avoided it. She recalled her past, having been a genius from a young age, a fact that left her perpetually misunderstood and alone. Over time, relationships had simply begun to feel like a nuisance. Yet, in the present moment, she found herself holding Ultos close, his head pressed against her chest, as she pondered if things truly ended up like this. He could only manage a flustered before hesitantly addressing her. Miss Carla, she looked down at him, her expression softening. She reassured him, stating that she understood him completely, for she was the same. There was no way she could simply leave him to suffer in loneliness. He could only utter a surprised huh in response, still pressed against her, his face flushed with confusion. He found himself pressed against Carla's chest, his mind momentarily distracted by the unexpected softness. Yet, his initial reaction quickly gave way to a surge of panic as he internally questioned how he had once again found himself in such an intimate and bewildering situation, desperately trying to regain his composure. Carla held him tighter, murmuring soft reassurances that everything would be all right, even as his face remained buried against her. He acknowledged the situation internally, trying to rationalize the closeness. As Carla continued to hold him, a deeper understanding of her character began to surface in his mind. He recalled that in the game, he had cleared her route 10 times, with 9 of those endings being pure romance. He affirmed his affection for her, recognizing her as a beloved figure. His thoughts returned to the present, a sense of blissful ascension washing over him as he realized he was experiencing this physical closeness with Carla in reality. She continued to hold him gently, small, ethereal hearts seeming to emanate from her, reflecting her deep affection. A sudden jolt of alarm shot through him, questioning the appropriateness of the situation, only for him to immediately dismiss that line of thought as irrelevant to the larger issue at hand. He realized the gravity of his predicament. The game's events were still 4.5 years away, rendering his future knowledge less useful in the present. His ultimate goal was to live a quiet life as a background character, using his foresight to avoid trouble. Yet, this intimate moment with a heroine directly contradicted that objective, leaving him utterly bewildered about the correct course of action. As the embrace finally loosened, he looked up, meeting Carla's gaze as she peered down at him. She informed him that there would be no lesson today, as she had other plans, but then declared that starting tomorrow, she would begin teaching him magic, warning him that she intended to be very strict. She had just declared her intention to teach him magic, and Altos, still reeling from the unexpected intimacy, found himself blushing profusely. Internally, he admitted she was beautiful, managing only a soft, hesitant, "Oh, okay." As she prepared to leave, Carla Orlandrasaka turned to him, her expression firm. She informed him that he no longer needed to act like a sleazy little perv in her presence. Altos, still flustered, simply replied, "Got it." With a final glance, she bid him farewell, stating, "See you then," before exiting the room, with maid_1 standing by the door. Even after her departure, Altos remained flushed, his mind still captivated by her. He found himself silently confessing, "I love you, Carla-sensei." His visible distress did not go unnoticed. Maid_1, observing his bright red face, approached him with concern, asking if he had a fever. She pressed him, her concern evident. Altos, looking away in embarrassment, offered a vague explanation, suggesting he might be nervous and a little tired. As the group moved through the grand hall, Altos's thoughts turned to his precarious situation. He mused that there wasn't enough information to act decisively, and making the wrong move could trigger a death flag. For now, he resolved to play it safe with Carla-sensei. A short while later, a plate of neatly cut sandwiches and a cup of tea sat waiting, a quiet interlude in the day. As he ate, Altos reflected on the original timeline, a tragic memory where Carla-sensei had pulled strings behind the scenes to strip him of his title and throw him into prison. He chewed thoughtfully, a new resolve hardening his expression. He would absolutely not let that happen this time. It was afternoon at the mercenary training grounds, a formidable fortress where warriors honed their skills. Altos, practicing his swordplay, once again struck himself with his blade, crying out in pain and frustration. A man with a confident smirk then offered to teach him how to avoid getting hit, jokingly warning that constant collisions might lead to baldness. He then showed Altos the proper technique, instructing him to move his head out of the way, demonstrating the motion with his own sword. After their practice, the instructor casually inquired if Altos's magic tutor was indeed Carla Orland. Altos, surprised by the question, asked how he knew, finding it somewhat unsettling. The instructor laughed, explaining that Carla Orland was a celebrity, a topic of common conversation among everyone. The instructor affirmed that Carla-sensei was indeed famous, describing her as young, gorgeous, stacked, and crazy strong. Altos seemed to process this information with a thoughtful expression. He internally questioned the instructor's choice of words, wondering if he was being foolish. Meanwhile, the narrator confirmed that Carla Orland was indeed the capital's #1 mage, highly sought after by nobles for their children's tutelage, and that the Randall family had successfully secured her services, as expected. The sword instructor, with a knowing smirk, relayed a rumor about the young master, Altos, claiming he had thrown a tantrum and demanded a magic tutor who was both attractive and well-endowed. Altos, looking utterly mortified, could only manage a bewildered, "Seriously?" as the instructor chuckled at his classic reaction. He continued, assuring Altos that he understood his true intentions and offered his assistance should he ever need it. Altos, however, remained perplexed, internally dismissing the instructor's words as the incomprehensible ramblings of an F-rank adventurer. Later, sitting across from Carla-sensei, Altos declared his decision. He would dedicate his mornings to her magic lessons, recognizing that leveling up was his immediate priority. He further outlined his rigorous schedule, explaining that his afternoons would be spent training his swordsmanship with Enrique, acknowledging that even an F-ranker like him surprisingly had much to impart. Just like that, 6 months passed in a blur of dedicated training. Altos, focused and determined, resolved to use any spare moment to cast body enhancement spells, further powering himself up. Suddenly, a maid burst into the room, her voice urgent, announcing a message had just arrived from the Lord. She informed Altos that his father was returning home in 1 year, emphasizing that this particular message was different from his usual correspondence. Altos, surprised, questioned why. He absorbed the news, a thoughtful expression on his face. Altos speculated that his father's return might be connected to frequent monster sightings in their territory. He realized with a pang of nervousness that this would be their first meeting since his reincarnation, making the prospect quite daunting. He listened as the maid explained that the letter stated his father wished to meet with the family in a nearby town. His eyes widened in surprise, questioning the mention of a town. The maid confirmed the location, naming the town of Lion. As her gaze drifted towards the distant cityscape, a shiver ran down his spine, his eyes wide with a sudden, dreadful realization. He knew what was coming. The maid, noticing his distress, inquired if he was all right. He responded, confirming that Lion was indeed a town, his mind racing. He desperately wished it were a different place, but the maid, impressed by his knowledge, affirmed that there was indeed a village near Lion, confirming his recollection. His expression hardened, a grim certainty settling over him. There was no doubt, it was that Lion. Every player of the game last arc knew Lion as the starting town. In the game's timeline, a truly catastrophic event occurred there 3 years before the main story began. This meant that in his current reality, the event was destined to happen 1 year from now. A sinister grin spread across his face as he realized the full implications. In the original story, that very event was what initiated Altos's complete descent into villainy. He declared internally that he could not go to Lion, resolving to find a way to avoid the impending disaster. Within the Grand Estate, a maid expressed concern to Altos, asking if he was feeling well, noting the paleness of his complexion. He quickly assured her he was fine, though he then questioned her about the color of his face. Despite his outward declaration, he internally admitted that he was not fine at all, a worried expression clouding his features. The City of Lion, known as the City of Beginnings, served as a tutorial-like episode in the main story. However, this particular tutorial was unlike the typical ones, prompting a question of why. A splendid party was hosted by the Duke and Duchess, a grand affair. Yet, beneath the surface of this elegant gathering, a more clandestine event unfolded. As Last Arcana was an eroge, it also featured a tutorial for such matters, revealing a suspicious party taking place behind the scenes, where masked women in revealing attire offered choices like kiss her, hug her, or talk her. The central figure of this hidden, more illicit gathering was Kazuto's, his face contorted in a leering grin, his tongue lolling out. Having fallen into the trap of the Black Curtain, he found himself engaged in a depraved game, surrounded by several masked women who wielded whips and teased him, one even offering a please with a suggestive gesture. This was the M route of the game. A crowd of onlookers gasped in shock and disgust, their whispers confirming the rumors. The rumors were true. I saw it with my own eyes. He's a pervert, a scumbag, and a rogue character. Meanwhile, Carla Sensei, her expression stern, reflected on the unfolding events. The main heroine would come to despise him like a snake, and eventually, the truth of his depravity as a corrupt noble and an rogue character would spread not only within the estate, but throughout the entire world. His fate as a mid-boss villain was now irrevocably sealed. Altos lay in his bed, reflecting on the events, concluding that this was roughly the first half of the City of Beginnings, Lion. He mused that the latter half, which involved battle tutorials and similar elements, did not concern him. He lay in bed, his eyes wide with a mixture of contemplation and concern, reflecting on the events that had transpired. He considered the tutorial's social aspects, particularly the scandalous party hosted by Kazuto's and the symbolic villainess. He mused that, ordinarily, one could simply avoid such a party, or even avoid Lion altogether. But this was no ordinary world. He sat up, realizing that this was an eroge world, and it seemed to possess a terrifying power to force the scenario to unfold exactly as it was meant to. He concluded that the common sense from his original world would not apply here. His first priority, he decided, must be to gather information. The mercenary corps training ground stood as a formidable fortress, a place where warriors honed their skills. Upon arriving, Altos inquired about Enrique, only to learn from a guard that he had gone out to the pleasure district last night and had not yet returned. Altos expressed his surprise at this news. As the guard departed, a new figure, Jose, approached him. Jose introduced himself as Altos' training partner, explaining that he would follow Altos' lead. Altos, in turn, asked about the nature of their training, to which Jose replied that they would typically engage in 5 basic matches. Jose observed Altos as he diligently practiced his basic sword movements, noting his form. After the basic movements were complete, Jose confirmed that the foundational training was finished and proposed they proceed with the 5-match bout. He stood ready, a training sword in hand. As his partner, Jose offered a polite greeting, "Please take care of me." Altos, equally prepared, responded, "Anytime you're ready." With that declaration, he moved with astonishing speed, a blur of motion that left Jose barely enough time to react. Jose's eyes widened in shock as Altos' blade connected, forcing a desperate block. What? This speed? Jose thought, utterly taken aback. His relentless assault continued, a flurry of strikes that kept Jose on the defensive, struggling to parry each blow. Jose, analyzing the rapid movements, internally noted body reinforcement. The training sword flashed again, a testament to his unwavering speed. Jose, still reeling from the unexpected ferocity, realized the first point had been scored against him. No way, he muttered to himself, disbelief etched across his face. A grim determination settled over Jose as he considered the implications. This guy? If I don't go all out, I won't even be a training partner, and I might get fired, he thought, the seriousness of the situation dawning on him. He then declared, "Well, second match, anytime you're ready." As he prepared for the next round, Jose scrutinized Altos, a new thought forming in his mind. What? His swing is slow? No, he's slow overall. Idiot? He pondered, a contradictory assessment that hinted at a deeper analysis of Altos' technique. The sword instructor, a man of formidable skill, once again disarmed Altos, marking the 5th consecutive victory in their sparring session. Altos, defeated, conceded the match. Altos respectfully thanked him for the practice, but the instructor, still reeling from the unexpected outcome, internally lamented losing all 5 matches to the young master. He furrowed his brow, replaying the matches in his mind. He had been tricked by Altos' initial display of speed, becoming overly cautious, which ultimately led to his defeat. He quickly dismissed his own excuses, realizing that the young master was simply genuinely strong. Meanwhile, Altos pondered the instructor's performance, finding it peculiar. He considered the instructor, Jose, to be significantly weaker than Enrique, wondering if his rank was even lower. He was glad he had practiced his mob-style body strengthening, without relying on it during their spar. The instructor, Jose, continued his internal assessment, noting that Altos possessed a good personality and seemed to be a capable individual with clear aspirations. Altos, a year into his reincarnation in this world, decided he should seek Jose's opinion, acknowledging the instructor's greater experience. He wondered if it would be appropriate to ask a question. The scene shifted to an imposing castle, its stone walls reaching towards the sky. Altos' thoughts echoed, questioning if it was truly acceptable to flee when danger arose. Jose, standing with the sword instructor, affirmed that abandoning everything and fleeing was the correct course of action in perilous situations, emphasizing that an adventurer's survival was paramount, for death left nothing. The instructor acknowledged his advice, thanking him for the insight. A delicate tea set sat on a polished table, a moment of calm before Altos's lingering question resurfaced. What truly constituted a really dangerous situation? Altos then found himself speaking with Carla-sensei, who inquired if he had encountered any trouble. He clarified that he merely sought to understand the proper course of action should he become entangled in a difficult situation. She simply addressed him as my disciple. He continued his discussion with Carla-sensei, who, upon hearing his concerns, confidently declared that if he needed help, it would be simple, and he should consult her directly. His face lit up with a genuine smile, finding her offer incredibly reassuring and reliable. However, a flicker of concern crossed his mind. While Carla-sensei could indeed solve any problem, he knew her involvement would inevitably lead to entirely new complications. He reflected on Carla-sensei's overwhelming power, a strength so immense that she would be considered overpowered even within a protagonist party. He mused that perhaps the developers had given her a strange weakening drug to make her fit in, but even then, she remained incredibly formidable. He reiterated his core objective, to remain a background character, a mob. Therefore, he desperately wished to avoid any actions that would make him stand out, especially not rampaging alongside one of the strongest characters in the story. Carla-sensei, noticing his sudden quietude, inquired about his thoughts. He quickly replied that he was simply moved by her kindness. She reaffirmed her commitment, telling him to truly consult her when things became dangerous, to which he expressed his gratitude. Moments later, a maid approached, her expression one of confusion. She apologized, stating she hadn't quite caught what he said, and asked him to repeat it. He clarified, asking if her ears had gone bad, and explained that he had just asked Carla-sensei for the correct way to handle truly dangerous situations. The maid, still looking perplexed, simply responded with a questioning yes. The maid's expression hardened, clearly annoyed by his phrasing. He stammered, realizing his mistake, and tried to rephrase his request, asking her to share her thoughts on what to do in truly dangerous situations. He continued his explanation, stating that if one were already in a dangerous situation, it meant they had already failed. The maid, listening intently, advised that a noble's true battle was to prepare in advance to prevent such circumstances from ever arising. He absorbed her words, a thoughtful "I see" escaping his lips. The maid, now looking directly at him, turned the question back, asking what he truly intended to do when faced with genuinely dangerous situations. With a confident, almost mischievous smile, he declared that he would abandon everything and flee, reasoning that there was no point if he were dead. His bluntness clearly surprised the maid. His expression shifted to one of slight confusion, wondering what had caused the maid's shock. Still visibly taken aback, the maid sought clarification, asking if he truly meant he would abandon everything. He confirmed with a hesitant murmur. She then reminded him of his past words, recalling that just last year he had proclaimed he had awakened to Noblesse oblige. She questioned if his current stance meant that declaration had been a lie. The maid, visibly upset, apologized for overstepping her bounds as a servant. He, in turn, bowed deeply, apologizing and thanking her for her advice. As the maid walked away, he reflected internally that what he truly aimed for was a cajour noblesse oblige, a corrupted or broken form of noble duty. The grand mansion stood under a cloudy sky, its imposing structure a silent witness to the day's unusual conversation. He lay sprawled on the couch, hands clasped behind his head, a new realization dawning on him. He had been so focused on becoming a character who could escape being trash, a cajour noblesse oblige, that he had almost become a truly trash noble himself. It was a dangerous path he had nearly taken. His expression hardened as he continued to ponder, realizing that the trash noble he was becoming was the exact opposite of the mob character he truly aimed to be. Fleeing, he concluded, was truly his last resort. Altos, with a concerned expression, asked for confirmation, wondering if everything was truly all right. He seemed to be double-checking something important. His maid, her cheeks flushed, looked at him with wide, surprised eyes. She hesitantly addressed him, asking if he was truly going to unseal that thing. Inside a moving carriage, the sword instructor, Jose, and another mercenary guard were present. The sword instructor confirmed something with a nod, while Jose also seemed to acknowledge the situation. Altos, maintaining a serious demeanor, explained that while he understood her concern, his actions were not for erotic purposes. He clarified that this was merely a means to achieve a much larger objective. The maid, now smiling sweetly, reassured him that she would not get in his way. She then added, with a suggestive tone, that she was always ready for the unsealing. Altos closed his eyes, a slight frown on his face, and firmly stated that this unsealing would be a one-time event. He emphasized his desire to avoid a bad end. Her eyes widening in shock, the maid looked towards the interior of the carriage, where the sword instructor and the others were seated, seemingly processing Altos's words. She then lowered her gaze, a look of profound disappointment settling upon her face, as she quietly acknowledged his decision. The sword instructor, his eyes narrowed in thought, pondered the unusual flow of events, questioning if this was truly a normal unsealing or something else entirely. He observed the woman in the revealing attire, remarking that the bikini armor and the aon were likely fakes. Meanwhile, Altos, startled by the sight of the woman in the bikini, questioned what Enrique was doing. The woman herself, equally surprised, wondered if she was addressing Bakken. The journey ahead led to Lyon, the largest city within the Landal territory and a top-tier city in the kingdom. However, in the game's original progression, this was precisely where Ultos' scumification would rapidly advance, a development deemed extremely undesirable. This scumification was a cunning strategy designed to be avoided. It was a plan orchestrated by the evil older sister to ensnare Riella, involving multiple women in black lingerie and masks. Ultos, deep in thought, touched his chin. He realized he had explained the game's story poorly, and felt that his intentions hadn't been conveyed effectively. A woman in a maid uniform, looking downcast, confessed that she never lasted long in any job. Even if she started well, she was quickly dismissed. She then looked up, questioning with a soft hum. The sword instructor looked utterly shocked, exclaiming in disbelief and calling it a waste. He mused that whoever had fired her understood nothing of true value. He continued his internal assessment, noting her beauty and ample figure, then wondered if her personality was also exceptionally rare. Sitting on the bed, the sword instructor turned to the maid, asking if she agreed with his assessment. He then revealed that in the game, Kazutos had also fired her. Ultos responded with a sound of understanding. The maid, looking surprised and slightly flustered, thanked them. She then admitted that she was a bit clumsy, and even in her current residence, she had broken many dishes and caused various troubles. Both Ultos and the sword instructor looked utterly bewildered by her confession. Ultos questioned, "Clumsy?" while the sword instructor echoed, "Broken dishes?" He listened as a new maid, Riella, explained that she was on the verge of being fired, but Master Ultos had intervened. She recounted his words, stating that he would not forgive anyone who dared to dismiss her. The sword instructor looked on with a serious expression, while Ultos appeared surprised by Riella's revelation. The name Kazutos hanging in the air. Riella's eyes, filled with a quiet determination, conveyed her resolve as she declared, "That's why." She continued, explaining that no matter what kind of maid Ultos desired, she was determined to become that maid for him. Ultos, still processing her intense declaration, questioned her reasoning, asking why she would go to such lengths for him. He pressed further, wondering why she was so fixated on being a maid, especially given her extreme clumsiness. The sword instructor echoed his confusion, asking what her primary duties would even be. Riella, caught off guard, stammered a response. She then revealed her past, explaining that she had been treated like a child by Kazutos and the villainess, who would pull her hand wherever they went, ensuring she was never left alone. She offered to do anything for Ultos, even if it meant being treated similarly. Riella continued, her voice tinged with sadness, admitting that recently, such treatment had completely ceased, leaving her feeling lonely. The sword instructor and Ultos listened, their expressions a mix of concern and bewilderment. Ultos, flustered by her intense devotion, quickly denied having a mother complex and asserted that he would not simply accept things arbitrarily. The grand city of Ryan stood majestically under a cloudy sky, its impressive architecture dominating the landscape. Within the city, Jose addressed a mercenary guard and a maid, instructing them to follow through with their arrangements. He reminded them that he was the one who had been protecting the young master from the front lines. The maid acknowledged his words with a simple yes. Soon, the group arrived at the Randall Ducal House's Ryan Villa, a stately residence befitting their noble status. Inside, a line of household staff, including the butler and two maids, stood ready to greet them. The butler offered a formal welcome to the young master, while one of the maids added that they had been awaiting his arrival. As Ultos entered, accompanied by Jose and Riella, he expressed surprise upon seeing the maid chief among the welcoming party. As they proceeded further into the villa, the maid chief explained that they had been preparing for the young master's arrival and that of his entourage. Ultos, recalling a previous conversation, felt certain she had mentioned this before. The maid chief then informed Ultos that his parents were expected to return in the evening, and until then, he was free to explore the town as he wished. He readily agreed, stating his intention to sightsee. Internally, he marveled at the familiar scenery, recognizing it from the game, and feeling a sense of profound emotion. As Ultos and Riella wandered through the bustling market, an old woman selling food greeted them, asking if it was their first time in Ryan and remarking on what a nice town it was. Riella politely confirmed it was, but Ultos, with a knowing smile, revealed that he had visited the town many times in the game. The old woman, her face beaming, then spoke of Mayor Gregorio, crediting him for Ryan's prosperity. She praised him as an excellent person, despite his humble origins as a commoner, just like them. Riella expressed her admiration, noting how amazing it was that all the citizens loved their kind mayor. Ultos, however, remained internally focused on his unique perspective, realizing once again that this reality mirrored the game he knew so well. He continued his stroll through the town with Riella, who remarked that everyone they encountered spoke highly of the mayor. Ultos simply hummed in agreement, acknowledging Gregorio's widespread popularity. However, Ultos knew the truth. Mayor Gregorio, beloved by the citizens, was in fact a cunning villain disguised as a benevolent man. He mentally mapped Gregorio's position within the game's narrative, understanding that while he appeared in the mid-game, during the Academy arc, his true power level was far beyond that of a typical mid-boss. Gregorio was a high-ranking antagonist, a formidable foe even compared to the final boss. He concluded that Gregorio was a far more troublesome character than even Kazutos, another mid-boss from the Academy arc. At this stage, he realized, if he were to reveal Gregorio's true identity to anyone, they would undoubtedly think him mad. In this current Ryan arc, he understood, he had no choice but to confront and defeat this high-ranking boss. His game knowledge was his primary weapon, but altering the scenario based on it was incredibly dangerous. He had considered fleeing, but dismissed the thought. His chances of victory were something he honestly did not want to contemplate. If he failed, he would be branded a trash character and face a bad end. Weakening his only weapon, his knowledge, meant he could not win. He let out a soft sigh. There was a time when he believed his original knowledge would make him invincible, but actually putting it into practice was proving to be incredibly difficult. Riella, noticing his pale complexion, asked if he was all right. He reassured her that he was fine, though his face betrayed some strain, and suggested they return to the villa soon. As they prepared to depart, he spoke to the sword instructor, asking him to investigate a specific matter. The instructor readily agreed, promising to look into it, and then departed in a carriage. The grand estate of the Orlandrasaka family stood majestically under the morning sky, its classical architecture a testament to their long-standing prestige. Within its grand halls, the master and mistress of the house, Ultos's father and mother, made their dignified return, flanked by attentive maids. As they entered, Ultos awaited them, offering a polite greeting to his father and mother, acknowledging it had been a long time, even though this was their first true meeting in his current reality. Beside him, the head maid offered a respectful welcome to the master and mistress. His father, seeing him, exclaimed in surprise, remarking that Ultos had grown so much he was almost unrecognizable. As he observed her, Ultos internally mused on his mother's striking beauty, a thought that brought a subtle blush to his cheeks. Her gaze then fell upon him, her eyes widening slightly as she uttered his name, a profound recognition dawning in her expression. His eyes widened in surprise, a silent question forming in his mind as he met her intense gaze. Amelie, with a thoughtful expression, wondered aloud where her beloved Ulchan could be. Her gaze sharpened, and a moment later, a young boy, Ulthus, reacted with a gasp of utter surprise. She then embraced him tightly, a gentle smile gracing her lips, admitting she had truly mistaken him and was quite startled by his appearance. He buried his face into her chest, murmuring "Mother," and noting her pleasant scent. Amelie, wiping a tear from her eye, apologized for making him feel lonely. He, however, reassured her that he was perfectly fine, reflecting internally on his mother's striking beauty and her infrequent appearances in the game's main narrative, and how some of the cream from Mama Suki had now entered him. Later, in a grand hall, Dominic, the family patriarch, placed a hand on his chest with a look of approval, affirming his happiness that Ulthus had grown to be so reliable. Ulthus smiled, expressing his gratitude to his father, who observed that he seemed to be doing well. He considered the implications of being taken to Gregorio. As the family gathered, Dominic explained that the following day would involve a demon countermeasure conference, immediately followed by a party that would serve as Ulthus's social debut. Amelie gently reminded Ulthus that it was merely a formal introduction and there was no need for him to be nervous. He, in turn, declared his resolve to uphold the Randolph family name. That evening, the family shared a meal. Amelie inquired about Ulthus's weight loss, to which he replied that it was due to exercise. Dominic remarked on his transformation. After dinner, they decided to retire early in preparation for the next day's events. Later, in Ulthus's bedroom, Amelie stood by the door, instructing him to call her if he needed anything, as she would be in the adjacent room. He acknowledged her words and bid her good night. He stirred in his sleep, a soft sound escaping him as he slowly began to awaken. As his consciousness sharpened, a vivid image of a young woman with long, wavy brown hair and a gentle smile filled his mind. He recognized her as Iris, the heroine of the game, and today was the day the player character was supposed to meet her and grow close. However, he lamented, in his current role as a villain, he was merely an outsider. The thought of Iris, perhaps at this very moment, with someone other than him, a jerk, filled him with a burning frustration. He imagined the scene, and the irritation made it impossible for him to sleep. He gritted his teeth, fully awake now, a deep sense of injustice welling within him. Why, he wondered, must he be the villain? His mind then conjured a complete image of Iris Webern, the granddaughter of Duke Webern and one of the main heroines of last arc. She was the woman his past self had loved with all his heart. Below the image, his past self, engrossed in a game, seemed to confirm his devotion. Her primary charm, he mused, was undoubtedly her face. It was perfectly sculpted, truly beautiful. And then, there was her bust. In the Academy arc, she was a character with a substantial figure, but he reminded himself to hold back. This was still just the tutorial. Her eyes, deep crimson and burning like embers, held a strong heart within them. He loved her so much. Meanwhile, Iris was currently on her way to Lion, passing through Hafen and Randall territory. There was a specific reason for her journey to Lion. In her homeland, the Webern territory, a large-scale outbreak of monsters had been confirmed. The response to this crisis had pushed the territory to its limits. She was on her way to Lion, where the Demon Countermeasure Conference would be held tomorrow. Her objective was to gain the support of the nobles, a daunting task for someone still only 12 years old. As the day of the conference approached, Ulthus, still asleep, dreamt of her. He knew that tomorrow he would finally meet the real Iris, not merely the image he had seen on a screen. The next day, the grand city of Lion bustled under a clear sky. Within the city, the Demon Countermeasure Conference, organized by the neighboring lords, was already underway. Ulthus knew that, according to the game's scenario, no effective countermeasures could be established at this point. And then, night fell. The stage was finally set. That evening, the Lion Mayor's residence was filled with a lively crowd, hosting a grand party. Amidst the bustling crowd, Duke Randall was approached by the Duchess Linder, who politely requested that he introduce his son. With a proud smile, he presented Ulthus. Ulthus, ever polite, introduced himself to the Duchess, stating his name. He internally noted that her name, Linder, was somewhat difficult to remember. A boisterous man, Gregorio, then praised Ulfus's greeting, exclaiming how splendid it was. Ulfus, however, internally dismissed the praise, thinking his greeting was merely ordinary. Gregorio continued to laud Ulfus, suggesting that with such a wise child, his future would surely be peaceful. Ulfus offered a simple thank you, while Gregorio's companion, a man with an eye patch, observed that one could indeed discern a child's future from the way they offered their greetings. He found himself surrounded by a group of older nobles, their faces wreathed in what appeared to be smiles of admiration. One woman praised his handsome features, while another remarked on his impressive presence. Yet, beneath their flattering words, Ulfus sensed a deeper, more sinister current. He knew these people were merely paying lip service, ready to speak ill of him behind his back, always seeking to undermine and waste his efforts. As he endured their insincere pleasantries, a chilling thought began to form in his mind. He wondered if these very individuals, with their veiled malice, were somehow connected to the Kuzd incident, perhaps even being one of its root causes. The possibility weighed heavily on him. A moment later, the Duchess Linder approached him, her expression one of concern. She asked if he was tired and wished to rest in a separate room. He politely declined, assuring her he was fine, and added that he should be arriving soon, a subtle hint at the impending arrival of Iris. Just as he spoke, a new figure appeared, a man with a wide, welcoming smile, his arms outstretched. "Welcome," he announced with an air of triumph. "He's here." The focus then shifted to a pair of polished shoes, signaling the arrival of the anticipated guest. A sense of unease settled over Ulfus as he realized Gregorio had arrived. His arrival was marked by Gregorio's elaborate greeting as he knelt to kiss Amelie's hand, a gesture that surprised Ulfus. He continued to shower her with compliments, remarking on her unchanging beauty and likening her to a butterfly dancing in a field. Amelie, in turn, acknowledged his flattery. Gregorio dismissed her thanks, insisting that the honor of meeting her was reward enough. Ulfus's discomfort grew as he observed Gregorio's closeness to his mother, internally urging the man to keep his distance from a married woman. Soon after, Amelie turned to Ulfus, introducing Gregorio as the mayor of Ryan. Ulfus, though recognizing him from the game, greeted him formally for the first time. He then addressed Ulfus directly, noting how much he had grown since their last encounter and expressing his pleasure at meeting him properly. Despite the man's pleasant demeanor and refreshing smile, Ulfus felt a sense of unease, realizing that a good first impression was crucial. Gregorio then revealed his past connection to Ulfus's father, explaining that he had received a great favor from him as a merchant's son. He offered Ulfus his assistance, urging him to consult him for anything concerning Ryan. As night fell over the grand estate, Ulfus pondered Gregorio's calculated move, realizing he absolutely had to play the game to avoid being deceived. Gregorio, maintaining his wide, unsettling smile, informed Ulfus that he had prepared a place for children of his age to meet, and also had something delicious ready, inviting him to come along. Ulfus's expression tightened, a silent realization dawning upon him as Gregorio's words settled. He understood the implication. "It's here." Meanwhile, Amelie, with a cheerful wink, reminded Ulfus that showing his face was important, especially since she, his mother, had social obligations and work to attend to. She encouraged him, saying they would both do their best. Ulfus, standing respectfully, affirmed her words. As he walked, Ulfus reflected that normally, showing his face would be fine, but this was the world of an 18+ game, implying hidden dangers and complex social maneuvers. He continued walking, Gregorio's figure visible ahead of him, and a thought crossed his mind: the day he would see his mother again. A flicker of memory crossed his mind, a sense of déjà vu. He felt as though he had seen something similar to this, or perhaps this very thing, somewhere before. Elsewhere, a young child, seen from behind, stood in a vibrant field filled with numerous butterflies, holding a net, seemingly ready to capture them. Two hands carefully held a butterfly, its wings spread wide, revealing intricate patterns. The ground was littered with the discarded wings of butterflies and the bodies of other small insects, a grim testament to a hunt. A young boy, wearing a cap, looked up with a wide, unsettling smile, his eyes blank and devoid of warmth, hinting at a darker nature. Ulfus reflected on the unsettling realization that the current situation, the dangerous game he found himself in, felt eerily similar to the disturbing encounter he had with that strange child in the park before his reincarnation. He recognized the same sinister undertones. As Ulfus grappled with his thoughts, he continued down a long, sterile corridor, walking away from the man who had just spoken to him. Suddenly, the smiling man appeared beside him, his voice cutting through Ulfus's contemplation as he inquired if something was amiss. His eyes, however, held a sharp, predatory glint. Ulfus, startled by the sudden appearance, quickly composed himself, feigning nonchalance. He dismissed the concern, claiming he was merely lost in thought. The smiling man chuckled softly in response, accepting the explanation with a knowing look. Their conversation ended as their footsteps echoed, signaling their arrival at a large, opulent room. Before them stood several women, scantily clad, their forms partially obscured by a rising mist. The smiling man, with a sweeping gesture, invited Ulfus to choose any of the women present, as if they were mere objects for selection. The room was a lavish bathhouse, filled with numerous women in various states of undress, some standing, others lounging, all enveloped in the steamy atmosphere. Ulfus stammered a hesitant objection, but the smiling man cut him off, assuring him there was no need to pretend. He then mentioned Gregorio, implying that Ulthus was already well-versed in such matters, a notion that made Ulthus flinch internally. He continued, explaining that the world was divided into two types of people, the special ones and everyone else. He then declared that Ulthus was, indeed, one of these special people. Leaning down, his voice a low murmur, the smiling man asserted that special people could treat everyone else however they pleased. Ulthus recoiled slightly, disturbed by the casual cruelty of the statement, realizing the man was attempting to indoctrinate him with this twisted ideology. He found himself in a perplexing situation, surrounded by masked hostesses in revealing attire. He pondered, a deep sense of unease settling over him. I'm troubled. His internal monologue continued, mapping out a grim future. A tragic death awaited if he fell into Gregorio's honey trap, leading to him being brainwashed, manipulated, and ultimately becoming a despicable villain. This path, he resolved, must be absolutely avoided. He continued to ponder the implications of his choices, realizing that the sisters presented to him were not the true objective. His own selection, he understood, had already been predetermined. Before him, a line of 5 hostesses stood, each masked and adorned in alluring lingerie, their smiles fixed and inviting. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a sudden, shocking realization. His eyes widened, and sweat beaded on his brow as he exclaimed, which one, Riera?